Hi, my name is Dr. John Douillard, and welcome to lifespa.com, where we prove the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with modern science. And today I want to talk about cheese. It's beginning of winter, and cheese is actually in season. But there is a huge controversy over if cheese is actually good for you or bad for you. And I get into that in detail in the article associated with this video, but let's talk about cheese for a second. First of all, in Ayurvedic medicine, cheese, dairy products are acceptable, but not any kind of cheese they suggest. They suggest soft cheeses like paneer that are made without salt. When we were actually in Europe, we went to some of the high mountain cheese huts called malgas in the Dolomites, and they actually showed us that they made the original sour casa cheese, which was made almost identical to the way they make paneer, which is basically just letting the milk naturally curdle. They do it in India with a little bit of lemon, but traditionally in Europe and the Alps, they would just put the pan out, let the cheese curdle, and they make it this sour cheese and eat it. No salt rubbing on it to make this hard kind of case around the cheese so it would preserve all throughout the winter. The salt definitely makes the cheese more heating because salt melts snow, makes things heating. In India, when you make a hard cheese, you have to put salt on it. Well, it's hot in India. And the more you heat something up that's in an already hot place, you're generally not going to like it. Plus, hard cheese in India would melt. And you have to remember that Ayurvedic medicine, and this was drilled into my head when I was studying Ayurveda in India. They would tell me this is not an Indian science. It's a universal system of medicine, and the rules have to be applied to wherever you go. And when you go into the Swiss Alps or the Alps of Europe, where it's freezing cold, cheese and all the salt mines that they found in those mountains, they would rub on this cheese, make it hard. They could last them through the winter, and pretty much a big chunk of their survival depended on it. And in addition, that the colder the climate, the stronger the digestion. This is an Ayurvedic concept. In the winter, digestion is stronger to digest winter harvested foods like nuts and seeds and grains and maybe more protein. And dairy products like cheese are more easily digested. Studies show that in colder climates, the digestive parasympathetic nervous system becomes more dominant to help us digest food. Enzymes like amylase for digesting seasonal fall harvested grains like wheat are amped up in our bodies in the winter and decreased in the spring when those grains don't exist. So we are circadian beings, and we have the ability to digest different foods at different times of the year. And cheese in India was something that was acceptable if it was softer, simple cheese made without salt. Therefore, it was a more cooling version of cheese, which made perfect sense in India. But in the north, in Europe, we wanted something to last throughout the winter. The rubbing salt on it and creating harder cheese was appropriate. And their digestive strength, because of the winter cold, created a boost for the ability to digest these harder to digest foods, if that makes sense. So applying the Ayurvedic rules in a universal way does allow for small amounts of cheese to be eaten, hard cheese to be eaten in northern climates in the winter, as they are in moderate levels. If your digestion is good, they can be vata balancing. But in a hot place like in India, those hard cheeses would just melt. They become very heavy, very dulling in a very hot environment. So you have to apply the rules of Ayurveda in a universal sense, which I think is really important. Now, Ayurvedic medicine recommends a diet that is about 90 to 95% plant-based. It is a primarily vegetarian diet. The only dairy they give you is the dairy. Only animal products they give you is the dairy, which includes most of the dairy that they would provide for you was cultured. Even the ghee was cultured. The cheese, the yogurt, the buttermilk, all cultured. And when you culture dairy, you make it easier to digest. You also, the culturing process actually breaks down some of the hard to digest casein, makes it easier to digest, gobbles up all the lactose sugar, makes it easier to digest. And also dairy provides what's called vitamin K2. And vitamin K2 is a vitamin different than vitamin K1, which you find in vegetables. Vitamin K2 is found in dairy products. And that vitamin K2, and I've written about this as well, has a matrix protein that actually directs the calcium in dairy to go to your bones, where they should go, and not to your arteries. So dairy seems, over our evolution of eating dairy or the making of dairy, seems to have this natural ability to make sure that the dairy did not cause heart disease. And K2 has been shown in many studies to be very supportive and protective for the heart. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle as well. Now, when you look at the diets that are 100% plant-based, like the vegan diet, and by the way, the only diet that has been shown to actually reverse heart disease, and you should all know, is a 100% vegan diet, whole food, plant-based diet, 100%. The vegan diet has been shown to literally reverse heart disease. Now, is a vegan diet a diet that we should eat every day of our life? That's a question. Because if you do a 100% plant-based vegan diet, you have to take some supplements like vitamin D3, like vitamin possibly K2, like, although you're only eating plants, so you probably won't get heart disease, so you probably don't need the K2 there. Vitamin D3, vitamin B12 is desperately lacking. One study, 80% of vegans were vitamin B12 deficient, and they don't get enough omega-3s that you would normally get in a 90-95% plant-based diet with a little bit of dairy. If the dairy is grass-fed, you get your omega-3s, you get your B12, you get your K2, and you get your vitamin D3. All of that is provided in that 5 to 10% animal protein, which the centenarian diets, and I did a podcast with the author of the Blue Zones, Dan Buettner, who written some beautiful books on the centenarians, people who live to be over 100. And they eat a 90 to 95% plant-based diet. And the little bit of animal protein they eat provides the B12, provides the vitamin D, provides the omega-3 fatty acids that they need to round out the diet. So a vegan diet will have to require supplementation. Great diet to cleanse you out. Whether that diet is, and taking a little supplement to get a vegan diet to work perfectly fine, 100% backing that diet. It's just that the Ayurvedic diet, when they created them thousands of years ago, they didn't have omega-3, B12, vitamin D supplements. You had to get it from your food. And that's exactly what the Ayurvedic diet provides. So cheese, back to our cheese, I think it's important to realize that there is science on both sides of the cheese aisle. And it's really important to look at the controversies of dairy and then understand how you may want to apply dairy in your life. If you Google or PubMed dairy and heart disease, you will find nothing but meta-analysis after meta-analysis, observational studies showing that dairy is nothing but protective of your heart or supportive of your heart, or at least neutral for your heart and your heart health. Now, when you talk to Dr. Michael Greger, the author of How Not to Die, a vegan activist, brilliant researcher, he suggests that when the dairy industry found out that people were moving away from dairy because of the science that suggests that dairy caused heart disease, that they started to fight back. And they funded a lot of research, and they figured out a way to kind of tweak the interpretation of the science using observational studies to tell us that dairy is actually safe or beneficial or protective for the heart. And he suggests that observational studies are just simply not strong enough to actually give us a conclusive determination whether dairy is good or bad for the heart. But that's what you see when you go into PubMed. Nothing but positive studies on that. And those studies are also done in Europe as well. So I'm not sure if the conspiracy is in Europe as well. I'm not sure. All I can tell you is that when you go and you listen to Dr. Michael Greger, who I'm a big fan of, when you read the science of PubMed, which I'm also a big fan of, you get nothing but controversial science. And this is why here at LifeSpa, what we do is we try to prove, difficult to prove, ancient wisdom with modern science. So when you have the science, which is completely controversial, completely 100% controversial, maybe even backed by conspiracies, so hard to know, so disappointing actually, that's when we, thank God, we have ancient wisdom. What did our ancestors do? And that's where you look at the centenarian people on the planet to this day, and you look at the Ayurvedic diets, which have been around for thousands upon thousands of years. They had a 90 to 95% plant-based diet with a little bit of dairy, and the dairy that they ate was soft cheeses like paneer, which were not made with salt. That may be because that kept it cool in India where it was hotter, but in Europe, maybe that salt is okay. However, I do list in the article associated with this video how you can get all the different non-low sodium cheeses, because we have an issue, and I've written about that too, where Americans eat a whopping amount of sodium and a significant lack of potassium. Most people don't even come close to the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance for potassium, and we overshoot the sodium runway on a regular basis, and that has been directly linked to heart disease as well. So that's something you need to check into as well, and really keep your potassium 4 to 6 times more than your sodium intake, and I've written about that, so check that out, and that could be part of the culprit, and maybe even some of the reasons why some of the dairy issues are there. Lots to talk about, lots to investigate, but please read this article and try to read some of the logic of the ancient wisdom, and also look at some of the very controversial modern science. Thanks to all for listening. I'm Dr. Douillard. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe and share.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.